Hello.
So to begin, what was it about the script that initially attracted you to the role?
Lorna, really. I mean, Lorna's the thing that attracted me to the whole piece, really. And the script was such a wonderful ensemble. It was such an odd but very realistic. Odd only, I think, because we don't see it in film a lot, but very realistic telling of lots of people, lots of different people's lives, and of people wanting to do better. Everyone shares this commonality is the willingness to walk through life as best you can. They're all a little lost in the beginning, but certainly I think their sense of purpose becomes more and more clear for each character toward the end, which I loved about the script.
And how would you describe Alice? Because she's a very strong woman who's stuck in a very tough situation. You know, she's almost ignored, and people refer to her as lonely. And how would you describe her? And sort of,
I think very in touch with the reality of the world's woes, which sounds really depressing. She's actually a very positive, upbeat, quite dry, very funny woman. But she certainly sees all that's around her. And there's a selflessness that comes from that awareness that she has of what's going on in the world and a want to help. And there's a real sort of purity to her, I mean, people haplessly, with the best of intentions, often offer a mercy fuck. Or something that's really sweepingly inappropriate and makes her really feel sad and unseen and invisible. Yet she knows that it's coming from a good place. She knows that that every action is generally well-intentioned. I think that's actually, being in touch with that reality, that's far more realistic than it is fairy tale. I think if you choose to see the world in a really negative way, I know for myself, if I wake up that way and I choose to see it that way, I'll have the worst day, week, month. It can go on for as long as I want to until I change my perspective and start, feeling gratitude and compassion and all the things that make your day better, and knowing that everyone's really doing the best they can.
And I read in an interview that sort of, if you see a woman is directing a film, it goes to sort of the top of the pile of films that you want to work
For now. Hopefully that won't always need to be the case, but for now.
And sort of, was that sort of, you mentioned that it was Lena that you wanted to work with. Sort of, what is it sort of, do you feel there is slowly a change occurring in terms of voices being heard and the characters being represented on screen?
I didn't work with Lorna because of a gender. I worked with Lorna because she's an incredible filmmaker and has an understanding and grace in terms of how she executes, filmmaking. So the reason that I put female artists at the top of the pile is because there's a huge disparity. And until that's addressed, rather than ignore it, I do feel that's something that I can do in some way to redress that balance.
Yeah. And in terms of your character, was it a dialogue you had with Lena about where you both want to take the character or sort of input? Was it a sort of quite a two-way dialogue, or was it very much what was on the page you were working with?
Neither of those. Neither of those. And I think it's rarely either of those. Some of the best experiences I've had are with directors where there's an implicit trust, or where that's your complicity, where you trust one another, and it's from there you feel kind of like you can do anything, I think. And certainly I had that dynamic with Lorne, and I feel like a lot of people in the cast did. And she gives you a huge amount of space, but she also is very clear at explaining what she needs in terms of the piece as a whole, you know, from that moment that you're dealing with. And that's one of Lorna's great strengths, is that has such a clarity of vision, and she also is so present and compassionate and kind, and can take, you know, lives life moment to moment. So she has those two you know, both of those qualities, which is really rare, I think, in a filmmaker, to have a huge vision and to be able to hone in very specifically on whoever's in front of her, whether it's, you know, one of our child actors who wants to play with a toy, or she just has a huge capacity for kindness.
And you mentioned sort of the trust dynamic. Is that something that can be built with a director for you, or is it something that sort of comes from sort of almost like falling in love or something, you know, that it's just two people where there is a compatibility to work together?
That's such an interesting question. I think it's almost like you said, kind of like falling in love, in the sense that it just feels so natural. There's certainly an ease, though, if you've, you know, sometimes if you've had a rocky experience, I think, as filmmakers, you know, with each other, you can then come together and you sort of build on that foundation of understanding one another. And then there are some relationships where it just falls very gracefully into place. I felt like that with Lorna. I don't know how she felt with me, that Andrea, but certainly there was a great sense of ease for me, and I really felt like I knew who Alice was, and I also had no idea who she was going to be, but I didn't feel a sense of urgency to make a lot of decisions that were not going to be organic or authentic, you know. Before we went into the process, I just felt like, I've started saying process, forgive me, process. I just felt like she trusted me, I trusted her, and we both knew who Alice was, and there were very little words said. It doesn't mean that there wasn't direction given, or, you know, but in terms of actually talking about who she might be, it's hard to even articulate that, because the nature of my work is that I'm this breathing, living being, you know, so to then sort of describe it or distill what that is kind of complicated.
And it sounds sort of that you really got into the head of this character. Is it, with the characters you play, are you able to let them go after a project, or do they sort of stick with you?
Oh, I think they're always with you. I mean, it's almost impossible. You know, one of the ones I'd love to have not stuck with me is Margaret Thatcher, but it's almost impossible once you've spent so much time seeing the world through their lens, as it were, to then put that down. And then there are certain superficial things like mannerisms, physical mannerisms. Those things are really difficult sometimes to put down. And Thatcher is a perfect example of that, or Wallace Simpson, with with a really extremely, just very different physical presence to your own. I think that's tricky sometimes.
That's brilliant.
Thank you
so much.
Nice to see you.
Thank you.
Have a good one.